Rain pelted the windows of Rosewood Manor as Lady Catherine Ashworth clutched the letter that would seal her fate, her hands trembling, not from cold, but from the crushing weight of her father's words. "Stand straight, child. Must you always take up so much space?" These words had echoed through Catherine's mind for 18 years, spoken by her mother, the Countess of Ashworth, whenever Catherine entered a room. At 18, she had long accepted her role as the family disappointment. Too plump, too awkward, too much of everything that noble society deemed undesirable. Tonight's ball at the Duke of Westfield's estate was meant to be her last chance. Catherine pressed herself against the marble pillar, watching her younger sister Helena glide across the dance floor like a swan, her willowy frame drawing admirers like moths to flame. "Such a pity about the elder Ashworth girl," Lady Pemberton said as she passed by, not bothering to lower her voice. "With that distinguished bloodline, one would expect better breeding. The poor dear must be desperate to find anyone who'll take her." Catherine fixed her gaze on a portrait across the ballroom, her practiced smile never wavering. She had become an expert at pretending deafness to such cruelties, though each comment carved itself deeper into her heart. The carriage ride home through the moonlit countryside was unusually silent. Catherine sensed her father's brooding presence beside her, something darker than his usual disappointment weighing on his mind. "Father, you seem troubled. Has something happened?" she ventured tentatively. "Nothing that concerns you, daughter," Count Ashworth replied curtly, but it did concern her. The next morning, Catherine was summoned to her father's study, a rare occurrence that set her heart racing with dread. The study reeked of tobacco and desperation. Her father shuffled through papers on his mahogany desk, unable to meet her eyes. "Catherine, you understand our family's position in society?" he began. "Yes, father," she replied. "What you don't understand is how precarious that position has become. 3 failed harvests, your mother's extravagant social obligations, and certain investments that didn't yield as expected." He finally looked at her, his eyes cold as winter stone. "I've found a solution that benefits everyone. There's a landowner to the north, Thomas Blackwood. His property borders our eastern fields, fertile land we desperately need. He's refused to sell for years, but he's agreed to a different arrangement." Catherine's blood turned to ice water. "You'll go to live with him. In exchange, he'll grant us farming rights to his eastern acres." "Live with him? As his wife?" Catherine asked, barely above a whisper. "As whatever he requires. He's a widower, respectable enough for someone of your limitations. The papers are signed. You leave at dawn." "Dawn. But, father—" "This is not a discussion, Catherine. Your mother is packing your belongings as we speak." Catherine spent her final night at Rosewood standing by her bedroom window, memorizing every detail of the only home she'd ever known. The rose garden her mother tended with such care, the fountain where she'd spent countless hours reading, the stone bench where she'd dreamed of a future that would never be. Helena slipped into the room, her face streaked with tears. "Is it true? Father is sending you away to marry a farmer." Catherine nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. "But that's beneath our station. You're still an Ashworth," Helena protested. "Apparently not Ashworth enough," Catherine replied bitterly. "I tried reasoning with father. He wouldn't listen," Helena said. "Of course not. I'm the solution to his problems now," Catherine said, squeezing her sister's hands. "Perhaps it's for the best. I've never truly belonged here." "Don't say that. It's true, and we both know it. Maybe in a different place, with different expectations." But she couldn't finish the thought. The 6-hour journey to Thornfield Farm wound through misty countryside, noble estates giving way to simpler dwellings, then scattered farmhouses. Catherine felt as if she were traveling backward through time to a harsher world. When the carriage finally stopped, she peered through rain-streaked windows at her new home. The farmhouse was solid but plain, 2 stories of weathered stone with smoke curling from the chimney. Fields stretched to the horizon, and an orchard stood in neat rows, neither as primitive as she'd feared, nor as comfortable as she'd hoped. "We've arrived, miss," the driver announced. Catherine stepped down, her silk slippers immediately sinking into the soft earth. A man emerged from the house, and she got her first look at Thomas Blackwood. He wasn't what she'd expected, tall and broad-shouldered, perhaps in his early 30s, with a face weathered by outdoor work, but even features. His gray eyes were clear beneath dark brows. He wore simple clothes, linen shirt, sturdy trousers, boots caked with soil. Nothing cruel in his expression, but nothing particularly welcoming either. "Miss Ashworth," he said simply. "Mr. Blackwood," she replied, attempting a curtsy and nearly losing her balance. "Leave her trunk and be on your way," he told the driver, who seemed eager to comply, depositing Catherine's belongings unceremoniously before disappearing down the lane, taking with it her last connection to her former life. "Come inside. It's going to rain harder," Thomas said. The farmhouse interior was as plain as its exterior, the main room serving as both kitchen and living area with a large hearth, wooden table, and simple furnishings. Everything clean but worn, practical rather than decorative. "Your room is upstairs. It's not what you're accustomed to, I'm sure," Thomas said, leading her up a narrow staircase. The bedroom was small but neat. A narrow bed, chest for clothing, and table beneath a window, overlooking the orchard. A pitcher and basin sat on the table, and a faded quilt covered the bed. "The washroom is at the hall's end. We have a pump in the kitchen for water." Catherine stood uncertainly in the room's center. This man had essentially purchased her, yet he was showing her to a private room as if she were a guest. "I'll bring up your trunk," he said. "Mr. Blackwood, I should know what you expect of me," she called after him. He paused in the doorway, expression unreadable. "I expect nothing yet. You've had a long journey. Rest. We'll speak at supper." That evening, Catherine found Thomas at the stove stirring a pot of aromatic stew. "I don't know how to cook," she blurted out. "I didn't expect you would," he replied, glancing at her. The meal was simple but filling. Hearty stew with rabbit and root vegetables, served with dark bread Thomas had clearly baked himself. They ate in awkward silence until Catherine could bear it no longer. "Why did you agree to my father's arrangement?" she asked. Thomas set down his spoon. "I needed help with the farm. Your father needed my land. It seemed practical. But surely you could have hired someone. You didn't need to acquire a nobleman's daughter." "Is that what you think happened? That I acquired you?" he asked, meeting her eyes directly. Catherine flushed. "Isn't that what the arrangement was?" "The arrangement was for land rights in exchange for taking you in. What happens now is up to us." "I don't understand." "You're not a servant here, Miss Ashworth, nor an obligation. What you become in this place is your choice." "But my father said—" "I know what your father likely said," Thomas interrupted, anger flashing in his eyes. "This is my home, not his. Here you'll be judged by your actions, not by his standards." Something shifted inside Catherine, not quite hope, but perhaps the first crack in the wall of despair surrounding her since learning her fate. Dawn broke early on a farm, Catherine discovered. By the time she made her way downstairs, Thomas had already tended the animals and returned with fresh milk. "Good morning. There's bread on the table if you're hungry," he said. "I should help." "What would you like me to do?" she offered. "Can you gather eggs?" he asked, considering her. The simple task proved anything but simple. The hens pecked at her hands, and she dropped 2 eggs in her startled retreat. By the time she returned to the kitchen, her dress was smudged with dirt and droppings. "I'm sorry. I've never done this before," she said apologetically. "It takes practice. The hens don't know you yet," Thomas replied. The day continued similarly. Catherine attempted washing, but used too much soap, flooding the washroom floor. She tried weeding the kitchen garden, but couldn't distinguish between vegetables and actual weeds. By midweek, Catherine ventured into the village for supplies. The moment she entered the general store, conversations hushed and eyes turned to her. "So it's true. The Count did trade his fat daughter to old Blackwood," one village woman whispered. "Wonder what he sees in her. Isabella was such a beauty," another replied. Catherine kept her eyes fixed on her list, cheeks burning. She collected items quickly and fled back to the farm. That evening, as she sat silently at dinner, Thomas spoke up. "The village has a sharp tongue. It's best not to listen." "You heard?" Catherine asked, surprised. "I didn't need to hear. I know how they talk. They talked when I married Isabella because she was from another county. They talked when she died because we had no children. They'll always talk." "They said she was beautiful," Catherine said quietly. "She was, but that's not why I married her," Thomas replied, his face softening slightly. He didn't elaborate, and Catherine didn't ask. Instead, she found herself saying, "I think I'd like to try baking bread tomorrow, if you'll show me how." The bread-making lesson was a disaster. Flour coated every surface, including Catherine herself. The dough was too wet, then too dry, and when she finally managed something resembling a loaf, she forgot to watch it and nearly set it on fire. When she pulled the blackened lump from the oven, tears of frustration welled in her eyes. "I can't do anything right," she said. To her astonishment, Thomas smiled, a real smile that transformed his serious face. "That's not true. You've managed to use more flour in one morning than I use in a month. That's quite an accomplishment." The unexpected jest startled a laugh from her. "I suppose I do have a talent after all." As days passed, they fell into a routine. Mornings began with simple chores Catherine could manage: feeding chickens, gathering kindling, sweeping floors. Afternoons found her attempting new domestic skills under Thomas's patient guidance. Thomas never raised his voice when she made mistakes, never compared her to others, never commented on her size or clumsiness. He simply showed her again, his large hands demonstrating each movement with surprising gentleness. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Catherine mending while Thomas whittled a piece of wood, she realized something startling. She hadn't thought about her family all day. "What are you making?" she asked. "A handle for the broken garden hoe. My father taught me. Said a farmer should know how to fix his own tools." It was the first personal information he'd volunteered. "Is your family from this region?" "5 generations on this land. My grandfather planted the orchard. My father built the stone barn." "And what will be your legacy?" Catherine asked. Thomas's hand stilled. "I haven't decided yet." Something in his tone made her look up. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. For the first time, Catherine wondered if he was as uncertain about their arrangement as she was. As summer deepened, farm life's rhythms seeped into Catherine's bones. She woke naturally with the sun, her body no longer protesting the early hours. Her hands developed calluses and a healthy tan. The muscles in her arms and legs strengthened from daily work. One morning, Thomas found her weeding the vegetable garden with slightly more success. "You're pulling up carrots," he observed, crouching beside her. "They all look the same to me." Catherine sighed in frustration. Instead of taking over, Thomas began teaching her, identifying each plant, explaining when to harvest, how to tell if something needed water. His knowledge was intimate and complete, learned not from books, but from years of observation. "How do you know all this?" she asked. "The land teaches you if you pay attention. Come, I want to show you something." They walked to the wheat field where Thomas bent to examine the stalks. "Feel this. The grain is nearly ready. Another week, perhaps 2. Catherine ran her fingers over the wheat. "It feels alive." "It is alive. Everything here is. The seasons tell us what to do, when to plant, when to harvest. You just have to learn to listen." For the first time, Catherine saw the farm through his eyes, not as a place of exile, but as a living entity responding to care and attention. The first frost had just touched the fields when carriage wheels on the lane broke the morning quiet. Catherine was kneading dough when she heard the commotion and stepped to the window. Her father's coat of arms on the carriage door froze her in place. Count Ashworth descended with his usual imperious air, looking around the farmyard with barely disguised disdain. "So this is where my daughter has been hidden away. Looking every bit the farmer's wife, I see," he announced loud enough for the driver to hear. "Father, this is unexpected," Catherine said, curtsying automatically. "Clearly," he replied, brushing past her. His eyes swept over the simple furnishings dismissively. "How quaint. Like something from a peasant's tale." Thomas followed them inside, posture stiff. "Count Ashworth, what brings you to Thornfield? You've grown even larger, if possible. I suppose farm food agrees with you," the Count said, ignoring the question and turning to Catherine. Before Catherine could respond, Thomas stepped forward. "State your business, Count. We have work to attend to." "I've come to discuss our arrangement. The eastern fields have proven less fertile than expected. I require access to the northern section as well." "That wasn't our agreement," Thomas said flatly. "Circumstances change. Besides, I've upheld my end. You receive my daughter such as she is. Though I must say, Blackwood, you seem to have gotten the worse end of the deal." "Father," Catherine gasped. She was barely useful at home. I can't imagine she's any better at farm work, the Count continued. You speak of your daughter as if she were livestock, Thomas said, his face darkening. Come now, we're all adults here. We know what this arrangement was, a convenient disposal of a problem in exchange for valuable land. Actually, Thomas said, his voice dangerously quiet, your daughter has proven invaluable to this farm. She has learned skills in months that take most people years to master. She works harder than anyone I've known, and she does it all with grace and intelligence that clearly didn't come from her father's side. How dare you speak to me that way? I am Count Ashworth, the Count replied, his face flushing. And this is my land, where titles mean nothing compared to a person's character and contributions. Something snapped inside Catherine. All the years of criticism, of being treated as a disappointment, crystallized into sudden fierce clarity. Enough, she said, stepping between the two men. Father, I have not been reduced. I've been elevated. Here I am judged by my actions, not my body. Here I contribute. I learn. I grow. I am respected. You've lost your mind. This peasant has filled your head with nonsense, her father said. No, father. For the first time, my head is clear. You will not have the northern fields. Our agreement stands as it was made. And where would you go? Your mother has already converted your rooms. To society, you are a laughingstock. You have nowhere else, Catherine. She has here. Agreement or no agreement, Catherine has a home at Thornfield for as long as she wishes, Thomas said. I see. So that's how it is. You've seduced my daughter to secure your land, the Count said, looking between them calculatingly. No one has seduced anyone, but I have found my place, and it is not at Ashworth Manor. Not anymore, Catherine replied firmly. Then you are no longer an Ashworth. Consider yourself disowned, her father said coldly. He stormed out, climbing back into his carriage without another word. As the sound of wheels faded, Catherine remained in the doorway, heart pounding, but spirit strangely light. Are you all right? Thomas asked. Yes, I believe I am, Catherine replied, taking a deep breath. Harvest season brought long days of work and cool evenings that drew Catherine and Thomas closer to the hearth and to each other. Something had changed since her father's visit. Conversations lingered longer. Glances held more meaning. One golden afternoon, they worked side by side in the orchard, gathering the last apples before winter. You've changed, Thomas observed. Have I? When you first came, you moved as if apologizing for taking up space. Now you move like someone who knows she belongs. I feel different here, as if I can breathe fully for the first time, Catherine replied. As Catherine struggled with a heavy basket, Thomas stepped close, his hands covering hers on the handles. Let me help. The touch was innocent, practical, yet Catherine felt it like electricity. Their eyes met over the basket, and for a moment neither moved. Then Thomas's fingers gently squeezed hers before taking the basket. That evening, as they sorted apples by the fire, Catherine found courage for a question that had lingered since her father's visit. Did you mean what you said? That I have a home here regardless of the agreement? I did, Thomas replied, setting down his apple. Why? You owe me nothing. When Isabella died, this place stopped feeling like a home. It was just land and buildings, a place to work until each day ended. You've brought life back to Thornfield. And to me, he said, gazing into the fire. I've done very little. You've done everything. You've filled this house with warmth and purpose. You've faced every challenge with courage. You've made me remember what it means to look forward to each day, Thomas said, his voice low and earnest. Thomas, what do you see when you look at me? Catherine asked, her heart racing. I see strength, intelligence, kindness. I see a woman who has bloomed despite every attempt to keep her small, he replied, studying her face in the firelight. You never mention my appearance, Catherine whispered. Why would I? It's the least interesting thing about you. Though, if you're asking if I find you beautiful, the answer is yes. Increasingly so, with each passing day. The words were like rain on parched earth. The first time I saw you, standing in my yard looking terrified but determined, I admired your courage. I never expected to admire everything else about you, too, Thomas said, his voice growing softer. He rose and crossed to the window. It's snowing. Catherine joined him, watching the first flakes drift past the glass. They stood close enough that she could feel warmth radiating from his body. "I've always loved the first snow. It makes the world seem new." "Perhaps it is. Catherine, when I made the arrangement with your father, I had no expectations beyond gaining help on the farm. But now I find myself hoping for something I have no right to ask for," Thomas said, turning to face her. "Ask anyway," Catherine replied, her heart pounding. Instead of speaking, Thomas raised his hand to her cheek, his touch feather-light. Catherine leaned into his palm, closing her eyes briefly. When she opened them, he was watching her with such intensity it took her breath away. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head until his lips met hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning at first, then deepening as Catherine responded. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "I never expected to feel this way again. I never thought I'd want to. I was sent here as a punishment. How strange that it should become my greatest joy," Catherine said, curling her fingers into his shirt. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the farm in white. A clean page on which they might write their story together. 5 years later, Catherine stood in the doorway, watching Thomas teach their 3-year-old daughter, Rose, how to feed the chickens without getting pecked. The little girl's laughter rang across the farmyard, a sound of pure joy that still amazed Catherine every time she heard it. Beside her, their infant son slept peacefully in her arms, his small hand curled around her finger. Catherine looked down at her children, then out at the farm that had become her sanctuary and salvation. The nobleman's daughter, deemed too fat for society, had found her place in the world, not by shrinking herself to fit others' expectations, but by growing into the fullness of who she was always meant to be. In the distance, a carriage approached down the lane. Catherine smiled, recognizing the familiar crest. Helena had kept her promise to visit for Rose's birthday, bringing with her the warmth of sisterly love that had never dimmed despite their father's disapproval. Some stories, Catherine reflected, as she watched her husband and daughter, don't begin with "once upon a time." Some begin with what seems like an ending, a rejection, a banishment, a punishment. But sometimes, if we're very fortunate, those endings become the most beautiful beginnings of all. The farmer's bride had found her fairy tale, not in spite of who she was, but because of it. And they all lived not just happily, but authentically ever after.